Right, welcome along everybody to our Christmas Challenge webinar, Planning Your Christmas Challenge campaign. Really pleased so many of you were able to join us today. After our wee hiccup last week, we wanted to run it again to make sure that you had the best opportunity to learn and plan and deliver your Christmas Challenge campaign. This will be available as a recording after the webinar, so if any reason you've got to leave us a little bit early, or if you want to make sure that you can share it with colleagues, it will be available to download from the Big Gives website. My name's Janine. I'm Head of Development and Learning here at the FSI. We've been working with the Big Give now for the last few years, providing support to charities participating in some of their match funding campaigns. So I'm really pleased to be here today, taking you through some of the initial steps and thinking around planning your campaign, and enabling you to deliver it effectively and really maximise this opportunity to raise funds for your amazing causes. Just a word on format for this afternoon. We'll have around 45 minutes presentation in total with some time built in. I'll sort of put some stop points in the way just to check, just to do a bit of a check-in with people, checking for presentation, for questions I should say, and Q&A at the end. We've got people on mute, so if you can either use the chat or the questions function in the meeting room, that would be great, and I can pick up on questions as we go. If we're struggling to get through them, I may save some of the questions to the end, so we'll just see how we go. You should be able to see the chat function if you use the menu. It's one of the drop downs. There's a chat where you can just use that to submit any questions or observations. There is actually also a questions function, so it might be helpful if we can try and keep everything in that zone in questions, and then I'm just looking at one place. We will also have time for questions to be responded to in the last 10 to 15 minutes or so. So on top of the 45 minutes, there'll be further time at the end where we'll stay on the call to answer questions. And we will email a copy, a download of the Q&A, as well as slides to you following the webinar. And my advice would just be check out for more things coming up in the next few weeks. The link's there to book, but there is lots of good content and learning opportunities for you. So first things first, welcome along everybody who's joined the Christmas Challenge, and really well done. Congratulations to those for all of your hard work so far. Congrats to those who received champion funding. Just a really quick reminder that the campaign runs from the dates there on your screen, so from midday on the 27th to midday on the 4th of December, and match funding, so the donations are only doubled during that week. Your dashboard, there's lots of resources that you can access through there, so you can find that by logging into your charity account on the Big Give and clicking the black button saying Christmas Challenge Dashboard. Really, it is time to get planning. It feels like a long way until Christmas, but we know that everything's being sold in the shops already and the ice rinks have opened, so it's not that far away from us at all. So really time to get planning. Use the next 4 weeks or so to get your planning underway and really maximise your Christmas Challenge opportunity this year. And the infographic on your screen is just a reminder of how the matching works. For you in terms of the matching pot being formed of pledge funds and champion funds. If you didn't have champion funds awarded, then it will just be pledge funds in your pot, and that's what's used to match the donations. If you've got any technical questions about the Big Give, I would just or the Christmas Challenge campaign, or how any of the matching works or anything like that, I would just encourage you to get in touch with them directly. So it's info@thebiggive.org.uk with any specific questions you've got, because there really isn't capacity to answer them, and I'm probably not the best place to answer them in today's webinar anyway. So let's jump straight into it. Let me just check. I've got a question that's popped up here. The audio seems to have dropped off. Can you still hear us? I haven't accidentally muted things. Can you hear me, Rachel? Yeah, I'm getting a nod from Rachel. I'm just going to suggest, if anyone is having trouble with the audio, I would suggest try dialing in from your telephone rather than through your computer, because it is reliant on a good internet connection. Try doing that, and that might help you. So first things first, planning your campaign. There's 5 steps to go through really when planning your campaign, and we'll look at each of these in turn in today's webinar. So first of all are your objectives. It's really important that you set some clear objectives for your Christmas Challenge campaign, because without these it's quite difficult to assess how successful you've been in your campaign, and to learn from what worked and what didn't to improve your future campaigns. And clear objectives will really help you maximise your success in the Christmas Challenge. The second thing to consider are people. So you need to be thinking about who you're targeting with your campaign and identify the different audiences, as you might need to adapt your campaign messaging or approaches for those different audience segments. The third area that we'll look at is your proposition. So you might adapt your message slightly for different audience groups, but you want to have an underlying core proposition that really forms the basis of your campaign. The fourth area we'll look at are promotional channels. There's lots of different ways to get your message out there, and you will need to communicate across different channels. But think about how best to reach your target audience and where they're engaging so that you can reach them there. And then finally, planning. This is really all about the details. So scheduling, identifying the work to be done, and in essence, making sure you know what needs to be done by when and by whom in the lead up to the challenge, but also throughout it and that crucial week that the matching happens and after your campaign. So let's get started with objectives. So your objectives should, we've all heard the acronym SMART. There's different interpretations of what the SMART acronym stands for. The one we've selected here is widely known and accepted, so that your objectives are specific. So they're defining what you want to achieve and how in as specific terms as possible. Second of all, that your objectives are measurable, so something that you can quantify. So for example, think about how much you want to raise, how many new supporters you want to engage. You might want to think about post-campaign targets as well. So for how many donors to the campaign do you want to convert to ongoing support for your organisation? Thirdly, that the objectives are achievable. So it's about that balance of ambition and reality. It can be quite demoralising to set a goal that you can't realistically achieve. So it's important that your objectives are achievable as well. I use results focused, so focusing on the results and what success looks like, not how you're going to get there or the process or actions. So you'll need to identify clear actions you can take in order to deliver the objective, but that's part of the tactical planning. The objective itself should be very much focused on success. And finally, time bound. Remembering that the Christmas Challenge takes place over that fixed window, over a limited time period, which is a fantastic opportunity to create a sense of urgency for your donors, and actually helps you to create those time bound objectives as well. And just some tips for writing SMART objectives. So I've mentioned already defining your objective in terms of performance or results rather than process. In the marketing guidebook that you will have access to from your dashboard, it actually gives an example on page 4 of a not so great objective, so something that's a bit vague, versus better objectives, more specific, more measurable, and very clearly focused on success. It can help to use strong action verbs, which will help your objective remain action focused and measurable. And as you move through your campaign planning and you start to define your proposition and people and promotional channels, you might need to come back to your objectives to make sure that they remain relevant and achievable to you. And on page 5 of your guidebook, there is space to capture your objectives, as well as those 2 examples I mentioned of good and not so great objectives. So let's look at a quick example case study. East African Playgrounds participated in the Christmas Challenge for the first time in 2017, and they were actually one of the award winners, particularly for their planning and execution of their campaign. So they raised some £15,000, 7,800 of that made up of online donations, 2,000 through champions, another 4,000 through pledges. And they set some really clearly defined objectives at the beginning of the campaign. So we've obviously summarised here to fit into a bullet point format, but they were around delivering the target, engaging X number of volunteers who hadn't given before, increasing donations from existing regular givers, and all of these were defined in much more measurable terms. I've just summarised them for you. But they fed back that being really clear on their objectives meant that they focused their efforts and they were able to develop really targeted approaches. So, for example, with their volunteers, their objective around engaging volunteers, they wanted to remind them of this amazing summer that their volunteers had volunteering with them, and use that to frame the donation request. And as a result of that, they actually got donations from 27 of their alumni volunteers. They attracted 49 new donors, and they also accessed additional donations from 8 regular givers. So by having very clearly defined objectives, they were able to use their time, because East African Playgrounds are only a small organisation, but they were able to use their time much more effectively and efficiently and really make the most of that campaign. So just before we jump into people, which is the next part of the webinar, I just wanted to check whether people had any questions. I will, if you can use the question box specifically related to your objectives, please, if we can keep it to that. I'm just going to pop myself on mute for 1 minute so you'll stop hearing me. Don't panic that we've gone away. Okay, so just coming into a couple of questions that we've had through. I've had a question about the slide, the objective slide, and certainly from my side and the test that Rachel from the Big Give has there, we do see the East African playground slide. So hopefully everyone else can see that, and there may just have been a time lag between the screens. We've had two questions. So first of all, what are people's views on asking regular givers for more money? We're in two minds about it. That's quite an interesting one, and I'd be interested to see others' views. If you can use the chat function, please do send your views in of that. I guess it's a call for every organisation to make, and if it's your first time doing it, it could be something that you test in this year. So perhaps you don't ask all of your regular givers, but actually it could be an opportunity, and particularly the match funding element, could be an opportunity to ask them to donate in a different way. You might ask them to make their regular, unless it's set up on a direct debit or there's some other way, but you could ask them to make their regular contribution via the Big Give site. It really depends on what setup you've got to complete those regular donors in the first place. But as we saw with the example from East Africa Playground, they did go to their regular givers. I think if you did, it's just really, really important to acknowledge any previous support and the current support that they're giving you. So it'd just be really important to manage your communications carefully. I've also had a question about what kind of language around the communications we recommend that you avoid. And I'm not quite sure, Alexandra, what you mean from that, but we will come on to communication and proposition. Sorry, I'll say that again, proposition shortly. So hopefully that will help clarify your thinking. And a very good comment there from Arnell, which is you don't get if you don't ask. And just remember that some people might be able to give more, which is really helpful. Thank you. So I'm going to move on now to people. So that's the first element, the first of our 3 Ps. Once you actually start planning, start by thinking about all of the different groups of potential supporters that you might have around your organisation. And I think it's really important to think about how you would segment those audiences, because you don't want to have the same approach to every group of people. You'll need to tailor your messaging and your communications. So you might differentiate by, for example, current supporters who actually might like the idea of doubling their donation. And as I said earlier, making sure that you acknowledge past support and you frame your ask at a current, a similar level to their current gift. You might think about approaching those, if this is not your first time doing the Christmas Challenge campaign, maybe going to those who have supported you in a past challenge but have not given since. Again, that's an opportunity to re-engage, and it's important that you've acknowledged past involvement and hopefully sort of thanked and fed back on the impact of that gift to that donor appropriately. You might differentiate between higher versus lower level donors, or current versus lapsed donors, or those who have not given previously but are maybe engaging through different means. So they've signed up to a newsletter, or they follow you on Facebook, or they volunteer, or they attend an event. And it doesn't have to be individuals. It could be, for example, corporate supporters, where you ask them to do something in the week, something to raise funds and have the proceeds doubled. They would have to donate via your website, but it's still a great opportunity to engage with those audiences. Whatever categories you use, my tip would be to make sure that each contact only appears in one of those segments. So you might have a volunteer, for example, who donated to you last time. Make a decision about which segment they fit in, because you don't want that person to be getting 3 emails because you've got them on 3 different lists, for example. And just to illustrate that, I've got another case study from last year's participants. So the Thari Machi Fund Education, I should say, they spent some time thinking about those key donor audiences, and then from that they were able to develop a plan that focused on how best and most effectively to reach those different audiences. And they kept it quite simple. They didn't want to over segment, but they came up with 5 key categories. The first one being their existing regular donors. And they were able to communicate with them. They were already in touch with them, so they could communicate with them through email and social media. And then they're big donors, so tended to be quite strong supporters, and usually had personal relationships with trustees at the charity. So therefore, the communication plan, or the way of the communication channel, was actually through personal contact from whoever had that relationship with that individual. It wasn't through newsletters. Celebrities. They wanted to focus, so the first 2 categories were about getting people to donate. The celebrities element wasn't about getting celebrities to donate, but to raise the profile of their campaign. So they had a small number of people that were already connected and engaged with their work, and they were able to engage with them through personal approaches to agents, as well as through social media. They wanted to reach worldwide, worldwide partners was another key audience, but again, helping them to reach more people, not actually to get them to donate to them. So they created shareable content for those partners and asked them to share those messages out to their networks. And finally, new supporters, so thinking about people that were not currently giving to them. And of course, the only way to reach new supporters was through some of those mass media opportunities, so actually getting coverage through social media, getting press and PR coverage, and actually by investing that bit of time into thinking about who are those key audiences and how are we best going to reach them, what do we want from them, they were able to focus their efforts on those promotional channels that were most appropriate to their audience and adapt their messaging accordingly. And again, you can actually download, using the links in the slide here, you can download a more detailed analysis of their experience. So moving on then to proposition. This will come back to answer the question we had just a moment ago on communication. A lot of research is out there that demonstrates personal stories are more likely to inspire support. So think about the impact that your charity and its work has on someone's life. The call to action around 1 donation, twice the impact is really powerful. Again, there's a lot of research out there that demonstrates the power of match funding. It leads to higher donations, it leads to a greater volume of donations and a better conversion rate. And the 4 pillars structure, which we outline in your guidebook, and Rachel, I'm so sorry about the mispronunciation of your charity. I've just seen that. Slightly embarrassed. I should have checked that before. But we have suggested a structure that will help you come up with your proposition, and it's thinking about those 4 pillars. So you want to think about what the vision is. So what's the ultimate goal of this project or the work that you're doing or your charity? What's the pinnacle of success that you're looking for? Secondly, the enemy. So what's the evil or misfortune or injustice that prevents that vision from being achieved? Which is a fantastic gift for fundraisers, because you've got a baddie to defeat, and it makes for a really simple call to action. The hero is the principal or the team or a person that's fighting the enemy to achieve the vision. So that could be your staff, your amazing volunteers. The hero could be the donor themselves, or in fact, it could be your beneficiaries. And finally, the recipient is the person or the people or the thing that actually benefits from that fight. So you don't need to have all 4 in there, and you may use that as a way of identifying your sort of core proposition that you then translate into different communication channels, but it should cover at least 3 of the 4. So it can be really helpful to get a group together and actually invest half an hour in just brainstorming the 4 pillars and getting that creativity flowing. And finally, don't forget that really clear call to action, making sure that you're asking your donors to make that donation, and using the time limitation of the campaign to create that sense of urgency for your donors. So let's have a look at a couple of examples to demonstrate what I'm talking about here, because sometimes it's useful to see how others have approached it. So accessible arts and media, again, were highly commended in the awards last year for their 2017 campaign. And they actually started out with a half-day planning session with 2 members of the team. And from that, they identified their different audience segments. They spent some time coming up with their core proposition and then their key messages and ideas for artwork. And then they did a piece of work around actually mapping the campaign graphics, working out what they needed, identifying where the gaps were. And they actually then decided how they would frame their ask for different audience segments. And they realized from that they actually needed to get a bank of quotes and stories for their campaign. So, so they carried out some short informal interviews with people that participated in their activities, got all of the things that they needed to actually develop all of those graphics, getting their emails and letters sorted, making sure that they had different versions segmented for different donor groups. And they also invested a bit of time in creating a short video that really showcased the sort of impact and values of their campaign. And to their mind, they fed back to the Big Give that the success of their campaign really reconfirmed for them how important it is to clearly define your fundraising messages as part of your planning. So let's take a look at some of those messages. You can see here, this is an email that was drafted. I'm not sure how well it'll be showing through on your screen. I've taken a screenshot from a PDF. But you can see this is sort of I've broken a longer email into 2 just to fit on the screen for you. And you can see it's acknowledging past support. So you sponsored Tom, Chloe and Carl to do the 3 Peaks Challenge. Thank you for that. This is one of the projects that you supported, and you can support us the future again today by doubling your donation just now with the Big Give Christmas Challenge. Then goes in to talk about an individual called Peter. So the risk of isolation is the enemy in this story, and the risk that they might face in becoming invisible. The vision, therefore, is that social lifeline for Peter and his friends, and they're vibrant and valued and part of their community. They then talk about the into more detail about Peter, so the beneficiary here, and actually then creates the donor as the hero. So you can make sure Peter and his friends keep on singing, signing and laughing together by donating as part of our Christmas challenge. So it firmly puts that potential donor in the driver's seat there. And again, just a reminder about that donation that's doubled, actually quantifying. So if you give us £3, we'll receive 6, and if you give us 10, we'll receive 20. And then it talks about how that money actually makes a phenomenal difference to their beneficiaries. And there's some really clear points in there that they're reiterating that doubling of the donation. But that particular proposition also fed through really nicely into their social media content. So I've just screen grabbed a couple of tweets there. You know, help Ruth keep sharing a laugh with her friends. Again, it's that same sort of core proposition that actually the vision is about people having fun, enjoying time with friends, feeling included, and experiencing joy. Another great case study that we've got here is from the Forever Hounds Trust. They did some pre-planning for their campaign and really identified that a big need for them was around funding for the dental care for their dogs. So 70% of the dogs they rescue have severe periodontal disease. And they felt that actually that could make quite a good fundraising ask, because we can all identify with the agony of toothache. So they developed the central campaign theme around being a tooth fairy for Christmas, and they wanted to, I suppose the topic itself can be quite grisly, so they wanted an element of humour to keep things light, and they also developed on the back of it a Show Us Your Gnashes Twitter campaign. So they got all of their supporters to tweet their dogs grinning, and using that to spread their campaign message far and wide. And they put their success in the campaign down to a few things, but really investing time in planning the communications, coming up with a core central theme, and being a bit more creative in terms of how they actually approached it. They posted live videos. It fed through to their campaign collateral. So we've got an example here, you know, not just giving one hound something to smile about, make it two. And this was a particular save the date that went out to their supporter base. They also used social media quite effectively. So used images to get their message across, because they found that trying to explain those different elements, if you like, the 4 pillars of periodontal disease and the causes and impact and treatment, can be quite hard to explain. But just by using images and some really simple statements, they were able to complete, you know, address those 4 pillars. So before we jump into promotional channels, I'm just going to pause again for, I've seen a couple more questions come through, and I'm just going to give you an opportunity to think about any questions you might have in relation to people, where we talked about audiences and segments, and proposition. I'm going to pop myself on mute again, so just give me 1 minute and I'll let those questions come through. So I've had a couple of questions come through. The minimum donation is indeed £5. It may be that because I was referencing a previous year's campaign that it was different then, but I've had it reconfirmed. The minimum donation is £5, Nicola. And Abby, you're looking at doing paid social activity on Facebook. It's something that the Big Give are looking at as we speak. So Rachel has actually asked if there's any possibility of getting in touch with her. It would be really helpful to have a conversation with you as they sort of inform what they're doing in that area, because they recognise that tracking is important, particularly if you're investing in it. We've had a question about, can we collect donations from an event and donate them online during the week? Yes. Just needs to be, the donation needs to be made by one person by debit or credit card. Okay, so I've had confirmation that that is the case. The donation just needs to be made by one person via debit or credit card. And actually, we'll talk about that with promotional channels shortly. Look at some of the ways that that organisations have used events to good effect. I've got another question about tips for getting in contact or on the radar of people who may have previously donated but did not opt in to be contacted during your GDPR changes. That's a challenging one, because if you can't, if your policy means that you can't communicate with them, you may be limited. I guess it will come down to each organisation and where they've put that balance of deciding where the line is drawn. But certainly, if your donors were informed that there wouldn't be an opt-in, I think, unless somehow they are receiving other communications from you where you might highlight the campaign, or if they were coming up to an event, or perhaps if you knew that you were in a local area, perhaps it's about getting to them via press or some other sort of mass media communications via your social media where they might pick up on it. But I don't think you could communicate directly, but you just need to check your own data protection policy and make sure that you're compliant with that. The simplest link you can use, well, you can use short links. We've had a question from Susan on the simplest link. So we'll often use a bit.ly link, so it's just bit.ly, and you can customize them, but you would just have to be creative, because obviously you can't use something that's been used previously. So I think I've answered all the questions at this point. I'm going to jump in then in our last 10 minutes or so to talk about promotional channels, and just finish up on some final tips, and we'll have more time for Q&A at the end. So in terms of your promotional channels, just remember that all of your promotions should be driving people directly to your Christmas Challenge page. So you want to avoid sending them to a holding page on your website and then on to the Christmas Challenge. You want to keep those clicks to a minimum, because every time you're asking someone to click, you risk losing them. Some areas to start with would be your website. So that should really be the starting point of all of your promotional activity. Make sure that you've got prominent information about the challenge on your homepage and in the Support Us section, and keep that section updated and keep the content dynamic. I would say the same for your actual project page itself, a really key part in your planning. If you haven't done it already, and I know a lot of you already would have, but just to make sure that that's up to date with content and images. Your email will be a really important part of your campaign. It's rated as one of the most successful channels from previous challenge participants. So make sure that you plan several targeted emails. This might include a save the date, an email on launch day, perhaps a progress update midway through the campaign, and a final update and thank you at the end of the campaign to really celebrate the success. Direct mail, particularly if one of your audience segments tend to engage more by mail, this is a good option as well. You want to give a short link that's really easy to follow, and make sure you get it out in good time, because even with your direct mail, that matching will only happen between that period. So it's really important that your donors are aware of that. So give a link that's easy for someone to type in, and get it out in good time, in case there are delays with post and all of those sorts of things. Social media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, you want to make sure that your social media is really well planned as well. Think about who engages with you currently on social media, when they engage with you, and what information is most relevant to them. So you might be wanting your volunteers to share your message on Facebook, so ensure that the wording of your post is relevant to a wide audience, not just people who know you. Events are a really good opportunity to tell your supporters about the challenge and let them know how they can take part. So certainly if you've got any events coming up in the lead up to the challenge, make sure that you've got something, whether it's a postcard or a save the date, something they can take away with them. But other organisations have done things like host events with donation stations, or having staff with sort of iPads or even smartphones ready to help that individual donate. And I know of at least one person, Lindsay, who now works for the FSI and has completed the Christmas Challenge previously in a prior organisation, found that face-to-face meetings were really helpful for key donors. So they had one major donor, for example, who would every Christmas Challenge donate £1,000, but he wasn't particularly tech savvy. So she would meet with him for a coffee, have a general catch up, but also use that opportunity to put his donation through the Christmas Challenge and get that match funding. linked to that, the personal approaches are really important for those that you're asking to make larger gifts. So go back to your networks, your segmenting, think about who's best to make the approach with them, and think about their motivations and what you want from them. It's not just about giving, obviously that's really important, and it's a real key focus for this campaign. But past Christmas Challenge participants have actually used individual approaches as part of their campaign promotion, and it's a really important message. Press is a really great way to reach new supporters. So thinking about the best examples we've seen are where you've taken time to think about their readership and what sort of story will resonate with them. So coming up with something that's actually a personal interest story, because the interest in newspapers is either selling or shifting copies. And if you've got an engaging story that helps them do that, that's really positive. I would recommend doing your research early so that you know when their publication dates are, but also working backwards from that, what their copy deadlines are, and make sure you factor that into your planning. Think about where you're directing people and when. So during the challenge, you want to direct people directly to your project or donation page. And in your workbook, your marketing guidebook, I should say, we've suggested a useful exercise to complete if you're just sort of starting out with your planning, to think about what channels you already have, what ones you might like to consider, and which ones your audiences are likely to engage with. Because particularly if you're doing this with small capacity, it's really important that you don't take a scattergun approach, but that you really target your marketing and communications efforts. I've had a few questions come through on promotional channels. I will address those. I'll just look at a couple of, take you through another case study first, and then we'll pause for questions. So the example I've got here is again a charity that participated in the 2017 challenge, and what they did really well, I think, is that they invested that time in the planning phase to think about what promotional channels worked for different audiences, so that they could focus their time and effort. And although they sort of segmented more broadly, actually their core two groups that they segmented on in terms of thinking about their channels were existing supporters versus new supporters, because their existing supporters they already had good contacts and links with, but if they wanted to reach new supporters, which was a key audience for them, they had to think really carefully about how they were going to do that. So for example, their existing supporters they could reach through direct mail, through email, through planned events, and through their social media in terms of those that were already following them. In order to reach people who didn't even know about them, they had to think a bit more creatively. So they managed to secure a full-page article in a local press. They also had a 14-minute radio slot, and they attended a local Business Expo event that again enabled them to engage with new audiences. And on top of that, they used their social media channels not just to communicate with people that were already following them, but also to creating shareable content that would be shared by their followers to reach new audiences. And in doing so, they actually successfully secured support from people that knew about the charity, but also people that had not given before, lapsed donors and new donors. So just to respond to those few questions that have come through, I'm going to pause here again for a minute and just give people a chance to type in questions, and then I'll respond to them. So again, I'm going to be on pause for mute for a moment. So just to start answering some of the questions that have come through on promotional channels, let me just see where we're up to. So we've got a question from Lynn on a nursery doing a fete for its Christmas challenge time. Could they bank the cash and then donate online to get matching? Absolutely. Just coming back to it needs to be an individual making that payment online. So so long as someone's prepared to do that from the nursery, then that would be fine. We had a question from Alice on if we did a text campaign, could they reply to text and it goes straight to the Big Give? There isn't the facility to do that. You could text your supporters, but you should direct them to your project page to donate via the Big Give platform. We've had a question about a direct mail piece, and a lot of audience members are older, may not have internet access to donate online. If people send a donation back in the post during the week, can it be doubled? All of the donations are doubled in real time on the platform, so unfortunately there isn't an ability to count any offline donations, so check or cash, as part of the campaign. So you might want to think about if you've got a group of audience or you've got an audience that doesn't have internet access, you might want to think about how you might reach them in a different way. So maybe, you know, that idea of one-to-one meetings or inviting them along to an event. It will depend on what sort of donation you were hoping to achieve from them, really, as to whether that is worth the investment, I suppose, of time. But it may be that the Christmas Challenge campaign isn't right for every single audience member and every single existing supporter. There might be some that you decide are not right for this campaign, but maybe a campaign in the future. I've had a question about what will happen if our total donation is more than the pledge or champion donation. All it means is people can continue donating once that match funding's gone. It just means that there won't be any matches beyond that. Just to confirm that the match funding only applies to funding for that week, and donations received that week. So any donations that come in offline would need to be, or not coming offline, but if someone's doing an event for you, even if they hold that event during the week, they still need to actually make sure that they make the donation through that week as well. The presentation slides will be available to you via your dashboard.
Slides, if they want them to get in touch, we'll email them.
Okay, if you want the slides, you can access them by emailing info@thebiggive.org.uk. Okay, all of the presentations will go up there. And then, can our original pledges continue to pledge to match funds?
They need to get any pledges in. If they did want to get some additional pledges, they can contact us now, but it's
okay. So Rachel's confirmed that if you did want to get additional pledges in, you can contact the Big Give, but you'll need to get it done in the next couple of days because that deadline's approaching. Oh, the deadline's already been, I'm told. So if it's something that's imminent, you can get in touch and see if it's possible. And that's just the info@thebiggive.org.uk. I think I've answered all the questions that are in there now, either in the presentation itself or just by running through. And again, there'll be some time at the end. So just to finish up, I'm mindful that sort of our 45 minutes, I should say, is running away on us slightly. So just some final tips really for getting yourself ready and really maximising this campaign. Your planning, it's so important to get the key deadlines and activity in. So on page 13 and 14 on your guidebook, we have included, I would say, a non-exhaustive list of some of the things that you want to be considering, both in the lead up, the launch day, the thank you and follow up, and the monitoring and evaluation. And you want to be really thinking about how you will evaluate the success of your campaign. So thinking about your objectives, considering what you'll measure to show whether or not this has actually been achieved. So how will you know if you've engaged new supporters? That might be a case of downloading the supporters and your data from your Big Give, or accessing that information and doing a lookup between your existing donor base to identify how many are unique. Remember that you can view your campaign progress in the Christmas Challenge dashboard, and there's a host of other analytics available which you can actually download from that on a daily basis. And I know it sounds really obvious, but make sure you've got the right people on hand throughout the campaign. So this isn't the time for the main planner to be on 3 weeks holiday. You really need to have those hands on deck during the week as well. And on page 15 of your guidebook is a bit of a milestone planner to help you get some of those key dates in the diary, and that could be a useful tool to help inform your planning. So just finishing up on some final tips then, do put the time into planning. The thing we hear time and time again from organisations that have been successful is that they invested that time in planning. They sat down for half a day or sat down for a couple of hours, got a few heads around the table, and put that time and effort into it. You get in what you get out. You get out what you put into it. Think about those 3 Ps that we've talked about. So people, thinking about your different audience segments, your proposition, and your promotional channels, and that will help you focus and target your efforts. Thirdly, make sure that there's a clear call to action in all of your communications. So how much are you asking for? What will it achieve? And what do you want them to do? Make sure you're driving them to that page. Give different levels of donations. That can be quite helpful, linked to a tangible impact. So we've seen some good examples of perhaps where people are reaching new audiences, where they've kept those that entry point low. So they've gone for the minimum 5, but maybe then had a 15 and a 25 option. And think about the tangible impact that that has on your beneficiaries. So think about that shopping list. Always send thank yous if your donor has opted into communications through the challenge, and also make sure that as part of your post-campaign activity that you've built in time for that as well, you know, to email all of those people on your different supporter lists and email lists to celebrate and share the success of the campaign. And finally, thinking about how you'll actually measure the success of your campaign. Think about what information you'll need to be collecting and measuring in order to assess whether or not your objectives are being met. And some final tips from the Big Give. Just a reminder, again, I know it's the 3rd time, but I can't stress enough, the matching begins at midday. So if someone makes a donation on your page at 11:59, it's too early. It needs to be midday on the 27th of November through to midday on the following Tuesday. Pledge funds are used to double your donations first, so make sure that you will raise enough. If you've had champion funds, make sure that your campaign plans to raise enough to access those as well. You don't want to miss that opportunity. The campaign launches on Giving Tuesday, so make the most of it. It's a global day about celebrating giving, sort of following Black Friday, Cyber Monday. There is a website for Giving Tuesday and some great tools to actually help you make the most of it. And there's a hashtag that's on your screen as well, so the Giving Tuesday hashtag. Just a reiteration from the Big Give that you get out what you put in, so invest that time in planning. Contact them on email with any questions and they'll get back to you. And then just a final reminder that there are other webinars coming up. We will delve into each of these 3 Ps in a bit more detail, look at more case studies, and there's also some other presenters coming up that the team have got lined up that really should be excellent and a good investment of time. So thank you all very much, and I will stay on the line again for the next 10 minutes or so, just for any questions. If you have to leave us now, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you on another webinar soon. So just to reconfirm, for some people who have had audio difficulties, there is going to be a recording available. Last year they were posted on that main marketing site, so the one I've linked to on the page there, and I understand that's where they'll be next time. The presentation itself, if you wanted not the recording but the actual slide deck, just drop a line to info@thebiggive.org. Let me just open out the questions so I can see what we're doing here. So Mary, you asked a question about donations through an event not held in the week. I guess I maybe deliberately answered that one obtusely, because as I understand it, the key point is that the donation is made online during the week. I wouldn't want to advocate storing up donations between now and then. I don't think that's the right thing to do. It's about linking it to the campaign. But the key thing is that it happens during the week, and the donation's made, that donation's made to your website during the week. Let me just sort by questions again. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through questions, folks. So the link to the recording, just a reminder, will be at the same place that all of the webinars have been listed, but again, you can contact the team if you're struggling to find it. And is there a maximum amount that one person can donate online? Okay, so the maximum amount one person can donate online is £5,000, but they can make multiple donations. And I'm about to post into the chat function where the recording will be, so that if anyone has had trouble with the dialing in or the audio for any reason, sometimes they can be a bit sensitive if you're using the voiceover or VoIP. So I'm posting it in the chat, and you should be able to just click on the link. It won't be up immediately. Give us a bit of time because we have to download it. But if you check back in the next couple of days, that'll be up there. A couple more questions. Let's just have a look. So we've had a question about a radio interview or press article focusing on the campaign or something that's at the end. I think what's going to hook people is probably your core proposition. This is for Helen. But obviously remembering that your entire purpose of doing it is to drive people to the campaign. So I would actually be mentioning it, making sure that if you were on a radio interview or on a press article, that it's actually mentioned 2 or 3 times throughout, rather than just sort of tagged on at the end. So thinking about, and actually if you dial into the next webinar where we're actually talking about the proposition, I've got a couple of examples there of where organisations have used press particularly well. So I think that's in the one that we've got coming up tomorrow. And again, that recording will be available if you're not able to access it. I'm just going to check in with Rachel on the question in terms of what proportion of donations might come from browsers. Bear with me. Okay, so just in answer to Nick's question, which was, does the Big Give do its own marketing and promotion to attract people to the website? Yes, they do. So they have their own database that they're communicating with, and obviously they're doing a lot of work to make a lot of noise about the campaign. But it's important to remember that none of that will be driving people directly to your project, and therefore there'll be a lot of other potential organisations out there that they're looking at as well. So I would say you may get some, but I wouldn't rely on it. And actually, it might be quite interesting to see if you do. It might be something that you choose to track, for example, is whether you've received donations from anybody that didn't appear on any of your lists and communications. A question, Rachel, on getting artwork approved where you've used the Big Give badge or identity or logo.
They're fine to use our logos on.
Yeah.
Like,
okay, no need to get artwork approved. Obviously, make sure that you that you don't skew and stretch and things like that. But all of those resources are available for you to use. So the badge, the logo, and things like that are fine to use, Julia. Bear with me, Leo. You've just asked a question about, I'm just going to double check on the requirements of this as well. I should know the answer. Okay. Leo, in answer to your question, so it was specifically about, can we offer things in return for donations? So, for example, £50 would be given a handwritten thank you, £500 would be given a framed photo of the work. You just have to double check HMRC's guidelines, so on the .gov website, around the implications for gift aid, effectively, and offering something in return. I'm sure some of those things you're talking about that are notional would be fine, but it's just important that you check it out and you make a decision based on your informed view of what the rules and regulations say. And Rachel at the Big Give has offered to post that, to share that link so that others are aware of it and can check it out. But from a fundraising perspective, that is a wonderful idea, and a really important part of your donor stewardship is to think about how those higher value donors, how you really connect them to the impact of what they've given you. So I think I've now answered all of the questions that we had. I will quickly drop them into a Q&A write-up that can be shared along with the presentation if you want it. So just get in touch with the Big Give team if that is something that you want. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. And hopefully we'll see you again same time tomorrow for our webinar that goes into more detail on people and proposition. And we will be back again later for with future dates with further webinars. So do check out that link that I've posted.